Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us here on Facebook Live. I'm Congresswoman Ashley Hinson coming to you live from my office in Washington, D.C., and we have a very special guest today for On the Record. It is the Director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. We call it CISA here in Washington, D.C., but Jen Easterly, thank you so much for joining us today, Director. It's a pleasure to have you. We've tried to do this a couple times, so it's great that the fates are aligning and we're able to do it today, but just wanted to say welcome to you. And would you please just kind of give the viewers today a little bit of background about you and your role at CISA and kind of some of the things that your agency is tasked with doing?
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Congresswoman. I'm so excited to be here. And really, thanks for your leadership and your partnership on these really important issues. As you said, CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, is the newest agency in the federal government. We were stood up just over 4 years ago to be America's cyber defense agency. So our mission is to lead the national effort to understand, manage, and reduce risk to the cyber and physical infrastructure that Americans rely on every hour of every day. And that's to get healthcare and to get transportation and communications and water and how we get gas at the pump. So it's really all of the networks and the systems and the data that we rely upon every single day. And our job is to protect and defend it. And of course, we don't own, as a federal government, we don't own the vast majority of it. So everything that we do has to be by, with, and through partners. And so we work very hard creating trusted partnerships all over the country. And I've got some great teammates in Iowa who are working to ensure that we're protecting the critical infrastructure that Iowans rely on every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned a couple of the key areas. People are also concerned about food security and how but everything comes back to those critical infrastructure elements, whether it's our schools, our ag industry, our small businesses that we need to protect from cyber attacks and those bad actors. Too numerous to name them all, because obviously it kind of happens behind the scenes, but we're kind of under assault and attack constantly from these bad cyber actors. So would you kind of elaborate a little bit on the biggest cyber threats that you're seeing facing our private sector industries and our government industry as well, for people watching who might want to be able to take those steps to bolster their own cybersecurity?
Absolutely. As you said, our nation really is facing unprecedented threats to our critical infrastructure, whether it's coming from adversarial nations like China or Russia or Iran, North Korea, or cyber criminals. And a lot of the cyber criminals, some of them sponsored by these adversarial nations, are the ones launching the ransomware attacks that we hear so much about, where ransomware has really unfortunately become this kitchen table issue, and the infrastructure we rely upon has a lot of vulnerabilities in it. And we have seen a rise in the impact of intrusions all over the country, quite frankly, and they've become more disruptive. They've caused great expense, and as you said, hitting schools, hitting the ag industry, hitting farms, hitting banks, hitting small businesses, and the list goes on. Any organization, regardless of size, is at risk of being targeted. But the good news is we can take simple steps that can greatly improve our collective cybersecurity posture. And at CISA, that's one of our top priorities, is to work with our state and local partners and our partners in business to increase the resilience and reduce the likelihood of a cyber attack. And, as I said, there's some very easy things that we can do. We talk about the 4 things, and they're on our website at CISA.gov, but it's about being able to recognize those phishing emails, those emails that are sent by bad actors. And if you click on them, it gives bad actors access to your computer and your data. So training to understand what that might look like, and then really being very mindful before you click on emails coming from somebody you don't recognize or a source that you're not familiar with. So being very mindful of that. Second, it's updating your software. We get all of these alerts that say, update your software, whether it's your laptop or your phone. And oftentimes we'll be busy and we want to delay, but the key is don't delay, update that software, because the software update means that there's going to be a security vulnerability, and you have to update to take care of that security vulnerability. 3, using strong passwords. So passwords that are ideally complex and unique. But the great news is you can get a password manager, and that can generate those complex passwords, and it can store it for you. And so that actually makes it really easy to have different passwords for all of your sensitive accounts and be able to access them easily. And then finally, my favorite that I talk about a lot is enable what's called multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication, which is instead of just a login and a password, you use a second factor, whether that's a thumbprint or whether that's an SMS text or whether you use something called an authenticator on your phone. If you do those four things, you will be able to raise the bar significantly on your cybersecurity and what we call your cyber hygiene. And again, all of this available on CISA.gov website.
Absolutely. And we'll make sure we share that link in the comments after this Facebook Live is done so that people can access that information. It's really true, right? You think about the intruders into our lives, and it may used to have been that they're coming in your front door of your house, and so you lock your door, right? You think about all the steps that you can put up to protect yourself, but those steps are equally as important with what you call your online hygiene and your cyber hygiene, whether it's you personally or if you're running a business, because we know that those bad actors are after all of that information because information is power, and they know that. And my kid's school was one of the victims of a cyber attack recently. So it can happen anywhere, whether you're in Iowa or in a big city. So definitely it's something that we've seen and we are very, very aware of. And you also have strike teams, correct? It's just a kind of like, I guess you call them teams that you're able to send out into states and work with local stakeholders, correct?
Yeah, we have a variety. So we have hunt teams that enable us to work with victims of ransomware attacks or cyber attacks and help them do incident response and also advise them on things that they can do to build their resilience. One of the things that we actually worked on over the past couple months was specific to schools, to K through 12, because they're what we call target rich, because we've seen so many of those ransomware attacks, but cyber poor. They just don't have the resources or necessarily the expertise to know how to secure their network. So we did a whole K through 12 cybersecurity guide, and we can provide that as well to help these schools and school districts know what they can do to reduce risk so that kids don't have to stay home because the systems are all locked up in ransomware. And so we have teams out there of cybersecurity advisors, of protective security advisors. We have emergency communicators, coordinators that are out there because, of course, we also have the emergency communications mission, and we just finished our emergency communications month. And so if it has to do with protecting critical infrastructure, whether it's public safety communications, physical security, or cybersecurity, we are out there in the field helping people reduce risk.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned emergency communications, and obviously April was Emergency Communications Month. Originally, we wanted to have this conversation to kind of kick off that month, but I think it should be all year, right? I mean, it's such an important part of what we deal with in terms of being able to communicate all the time, but specifically during disasters as well in emergent situations. So can you just talk a little bit about what you as an agency highlighted during Emergency Communications Month and kind of some of those resources that are available?
Absolutely. You know, we have a whole emergency communications division dedicated to public safety communications and working with the first responder community to ensure that they have what they need for secure, interoperable, resilient communications. I mean, we all know how critical that is, right? When you call 911, you want to be able to get through. And so we very much focused on making sure that emergency response personnel had what they needed to be able to build that secure, resilient, interoperable communications. And, you know, as we know, this is particularly important, not just 1 month or 1 day or 1 week, it's all year long. Their ability to communicate must be dependable and time sensitive to help minimize risk to life and property and recovery during emergencies. And so, you know, people don't necessarily realize, because you think, okay, I make the call and somebody picks up, but emergency communications is actually a pretty complex ecosystem with multiple stakeholders and multiple moving pieces. And it's more resilient and more secure if we make sure that we have strong partnerships and collaboration between emergency responders, the government, government, the information technology and communications providers, and of course, private citizens. And that's why all around the country, we have emergency communications coordinators to help ensure that public safety and national security and emergency preparedness communities can seamlessly and securely communicate during steady state and emergency operations. And so we actually have somebody on the ground in Iowa. If there are any questions around that, we're tied into the public safety community, also focused on adopting and using new technologies to make sure that we're resilient to some of the cyber threats that we're seeing, the more aggressive ones that we talked about. And so very, very focused on ensuring that our community gets what they need. I have to say, we have our emergency communications coordinator. His name is Chris Mares in Iowa. And I reached out to him to find out, to get some feedback from him. And what he said is Iowa has got it going on when it comes to emergency communications. And what he means is just a lot of amazing work that has been undertaken to ensure emergency communications preparedness. So interoperability markers, and that's the metrics against which state and territory measure the ability to communicate in emergency communications. And so that's considered optimized, which is highest level. And also really important to have the communications plan and the field operations guide that are all being worked on as well. And so really, it's fantastic to be talking to you in particular, because you all are leading by example and a model for what we want to see across the rest of the country.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, we're no stranger to needs for those emergency communications in Iowa. We have obviously a lot of severe weather, flooding, just a lot of natural disasters that we have to deal with. And so I'm very proud to have that local, state, and federal partnership, and truly a whole of society approach, right? Because you have down to the ham radio guys who are helping communicate in an emergency too in states like Iowa. So just want to say thank you for all you do at CISA. You are under the Homeland Security umbrella. So obviously, when you look at all the agencies that are housed there and the role that you play in making sure our cybersecurity and our infrastructure is taken care of is mission critical to the safety and security of my constituents. So Director Easterly, thank you so much for joining us today here for On the Record. One more time, what's the website that people can go to find out more about your agency?
www.cisa.gov.
All right.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Really appreciate your leadership and your partnership.
Great to work with you, Director Easterly. And thank you again, everyone, for watching this edition of On the Record. I hope you have a great day.
Awesome.